Well, I hate my fucking job. Well, I hate my fucking job. Oh, oh, oh. You know I hate my fucking job. Well, I hate my fucking job. Oh, oh, oh.
Hey there, all you ninnies, twits, dingbats, and social reprobates. This is Reverend Norm welcoming you to another electrifying, stimulating, and totally off-the-wall sensational episode of Killed by Desk, the only show that answers the question that no one's asking: what do us misfit musicians, weirdo artists, and oddball scenester mainstays do to make a living? Prepare to have your minds completely and totally blown for the details you never thought you'd want to know. The ups, the downs, the conference calls gone wrong, the coworker questions, the dress codes, and what they've learned and what they wish they hadn't, and if they're at all happy where they are and what they've become. From selling out to doubling down, let's talk punk rock business and what happens when the two get all mixed up. Here's your host, Bill Florio.
Hey, this is Bill. Dave, you here?
I'm here. Hey, sorry.
This is MC Charlie Boswell. It's working, finally.
Wonderful.
I can't believe we did 3 of these.
All right, we didn't quit yet.
How many times you gotta do something before it becomes a habit? 7 times? 17 times? 10,000 hours?
I guess it depends who you are.
I bought better mics on Clinton Street.
I mean, how many times do you have to smoke crack? I don't know. Anyway.
Crack, no! That's how we used to do it in 1886.
Last episode, we talked a little bit about what we did in music and stuff. Let's just talk about, like, our jobs. So I used to be a wedding videographer for many, many years. It's a soul-crushing experience. I had to deal with brides and bar mitzvah moms. It kind of shaped my outlook on what work means.
Those compilation videos are priceless, though.
Let's not talk about that. Anyway, about 15 years ago, I kind of like had a midlife crisis or whatever, and I was like, I need to do something better. I started working at nonprofits. I learned a lot making videos, so I've been doing a lot of tech stuff for nonprofits. I'm actually like a middle manager kind of thing. I have people that I ask them to do things, and they're supposed to like have to do their timesheets or whatever. Kind of have a real job, but then again, my life aspirations when I was getting out of high school is like, I do not want to wake up at the crack of dawn. I don't want to wake up early. I don't want to wear shoes, and I don't want to have to like commute.
You wanted to go barefoot?
No, not barefoot, just not shoes, sneakers.
Crocs?
I thought you were like Huckleberry Finn or something.
I didn't want to wear like anything that needed a horn to get on. So
You want those shoes with the toes on them?
I went to Catholic school. I had to wear like a monkey suit every day. So anyway, I met my goals at like 17, but I find that like it's been interesting having like sort of real jobs in the past 15 years, working at like organizations with hundreds of people in them. And it was kind of a culture shock to me, maybe because of whatever culture I grew up in.
Isn't that kind of what we're tackling with the podcast, is how do you go from something that I feel like punk rock came naturally to me? It wasn't something that like I had to work at loving. It just kind of came to me naturally. Whereas I think with work, I always tried to drag what I loved out of a situation that kind of sucked. So, I went to school to be an English teacher. My parents were super pissed about that because they said, you're not going to make any money as an English teacher. When it came time to do, my student teaching and do it in practice, I realized, no, I'm not cut out to be a teacher. Kind of bummed around for a while and tried to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I kind of happened into a company that was doing reality television shows. And the woman that I worked with was an old friend of mine who was pitching a show idea to the Fuse Network, which was what I think Much Music in Canada used to be, and then they came to the US and became Fuse. She was pitching a show idea that wasn't working, and they asked if she had any other ideas, and she told me later that she drew off of some stories that I told her about working in a record store when I was in high school and college. They ended up selling the show, so she asked me if I wanted to join as a story editor. And this is reality TV, so basically what you do as a story editor in reality TV is I think about that scene in Clash of the Titans with the gods where like they have the clay people and they make them like fight, or they make them put them in different places. Like that's pretty much what you do. You cast a show and then you decide who's going to fall in love with who's going to hate who, and all of that, which makes you feel like the worst person in the world, but at least you get to be creative. So I did that for a while we were doing all of these pilots, which none of them ever really made it to the point where they aired. We also started getting work from different brands that wanted like corporate videos. So they'd pay a huge amount of money for a video that they would show during like their company get-togethers and everything, just to pump up the crowd and get everyone excited. This was right as social media started coming about and gaining prevalence. We asked a couple of the brands that that we were doing videos for, what are you going to do with these videos once you show them at these events? And they said, we're going to put them in a room somewhere. I mean, they basically had no plans for them. We said, well, you can cut these up and you can use them for social media. And there's this thing at that point, we're seeing the birth of I don't even think Facebook was still for colleges. So I think it was MySpace, YouTube came about, Twitter. So what are you going to do with these? So I transitioned into doing all of that stuff, which then became brand management, doing all of this for different brands. Started off doing wine and spirits brands and then grew into lots of different brands. And along the way, I learned a heck of a lot on the fly about branding. I learned about marketing. I learned about public relations, advertising. So I wrote a bunch of ad copy, did all that stuff. And right now I'm a executive vice president at a fairly well-known New York City agency. About 5 years ago, moved to Louisville, Kentucky. So I split time. I work remotely and then I go back to New York fairly regularly. I have a team of people beneath me. We handle all of the branding initiatives, all of the marketing communications initiatives for a lot of really well-known brands in the luxury space, in hotels and whatnot. So it's fun because you get to be creative. I oversee all the branding and marketing communications initiatives for a lot of different brands in the luxury space, hotels, food, wine, and spirits brands, a whole bunch of different stuff. So basically I get to be the keeper of the keys when it comes to the stories for those brands and how they market themselves.
Sounds like you do have to wear shoes.
I do have to wear shoes. Unfortunately, I have to wear fairly fancy shoes.
All right, Charlie, what's your story?
I'm a microwave engineer. I have my own small telecommunications company. And I also am co-founder of CouponSurfer.com, an online coupon site, which is free for users to go on. They can print coupons or get online coupons and get credit card rewards. And I also do some part-time work for New York City Council. Microwave radio is a system where you can send voice and data over a radio signal between 2 points. So it's used for a lot of, it's used in backbone of your cellular networks. It's used for many municipalities and hospitals and big corporations. Big part of the role is to have a redundant system where in case all their networks go out, they could still have this as a backup.
So like if there's an earthquake and it ruptures all the wires?
All the fiber optics get ruptured, things like disasters, earthquakes, blackouts, so forth. But also it's something, you don't need to have that. It's something you can use as, it could also be, you own the system, so you can do this and not pay somebody else, not have to rely on somebody else. If you have a problem with your communication providers, you can have your own system.
Is it like pirate radio?
No, well, there are unlicensed microwave systems. I deal mostly with licensed systems, which are licensed by the FCC. So you get a license to use a certain piece of the spectrum.
So why can't you put aluminum foil in a microwave?
It'll spark. By the way, I don't deal with microwave ovens, which I have to tell people who call me all the time. Yeah, it's the same wavelength, different power.
All right, episode 3. Emily Flake is our guest. I knew Emily since she was about 16. She hung around the Connecticut punk scene, and she's...
Is that the Anthrax?
Not the Anthrax. She was in the Willimantic area.
Willimantic, I remember, at that house?
The house, and then there was like another club. I don't remember. It had like a studio.
It was better when it was in the house.
It was much better when it was in the house. The house was a little bit dusty. There was a cool scene. It was kind of like the New Brunswick scene going on. And it's kind of like not really centered around a large city. Bug Outside, he played there a bunch of times. People liked us there. And I always found Emily to be a very interesting and really funny person.
She has to be the first person to get not only mentioned, but a full comic about Jawbreaker in the New Yorker.
I don't think why would anyone mention Jawbreaker in the New Yorker before that?
It's just a strange combo.
She's the edgy New Yorker cartoonist. That's how I picture it. As edgy as a New Yorker cartoonist could be.
I thought she was pretty edgy. I mean, she definitely still has that punk rock element to her. She's written some books about being a parent too and all that. So I think there's definitely a lot that we covered in this interview.
If you tell them too much, they won't listen.
If you can give us your kind of like a little bit more than your byline, like...
Okay, so my name is Emily Flake, and for a living, I'm a cartoonist, writer, illustrator, sort of performer, back when that was a thing, household drudge. That's about what I do.
Household drudge or judge?
Drudge, with a D, with 2 Ds. As many Ds as you want to put in there.
Drudge? I thought you worked for the New Yorker.
I freelanced for the New Yorker. It's a lot less classy if you're not actually on staff.
Would you charge Drudge more if they asked you?
I'm not sure there's enough money in the world. Although, as a sidebar, my husband checks the Drudge Report every day to see like what they're saying, and apparently they are not exactly going hard in the paint for the current administration. So, I don't know.
Well, what work do you do for the New Yorker?
I'm a cartoonist and I write for them every now and again.
So you're a cartoonist for the New Yorker. Have you ever met Cousin It?
I mean, I don't know if I'd say met so much as had a brief affair with a long time ago. Yeah, we hang out. I am Cousin It.
I have the impression that you have this Stalinistic planning approach to life from talking to some of your friends. So, like, you were here to reach some unreachable dream, like the communist state. Can you walk us through, like, how this worked? If this is, you could tell me this is, like, totally BS, but if you could just walk us through, like, how you got there and when this started.
Well, first I need to know if I'm Stalinistic in the unreachability of my dreams or the brutality of my methods.
I think both.
Okay.
Or I would have picked some other example.
You would have picked Pol Pot if it had.
Exactly.
So I'm not sure I would have name-checked Stalin as the political path I followed, but sure. I don't think there was anything particularly focused about it. I basically just never went away, and now I'm here.
You're just saying you didn't give up?
I guess so. I guess that's what they call persistence or some shit, but
there wasn't a plan, you just kept stabbing at it?
yeah, basically I just kept sort of haplessly stabbing at this wall until it started to crumble enough for me to make a living at it. That's a terrible metaphor, but I think you get the picture. And I also failed to learn any other skills, so there wasn't really like a backup plan for me to disappear into.
Is there an alternate universe where none of this hit and you're like sketching things on napkins in a diner talking to yourself? I mean, like, what would the other scenario been if this hadn't happened the way that it had? I mean, is it fate that you ended up where you are? Do you believe in fate, or do you believe that it just kind of, you just lucked out? How do you arrange that in your mind?
That's a really good question, or like set of questions. So I think had I not gotten to a point where I was making a living off of freelancing, I'm not entirely sure what I would do, because Caroline did not last as a realistic entity that much longer after I left it. So I don't know if I would have been able to continue eking out a living on like the fringes of the music industry. That's as a deader end than the one I'm currently in. I didn't put you in touch with anybody I waitressed for. I was an okay waitress, but I wasn't awesome at it. I honestly don't know what else I would have done. That's a grim thought experiment.
Do you think you would have given up at all?
I mean, at some point, I don't know if there would have been a point where I would have called it, where I would have just been like, this is never going to happen. I got to figure out something else to do with my life. And I don't know what figuring out something else to do with my life would have looked like. I mean, maybe I would have gone back to school, but considering I'm still paying off undergrad, that wouldn't have been that great an idea. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I have secretly always wanted to work for the MTA, so maybe I would have gone to train school.
That's awesome.
As a train operator, as a subway driver?
I would very honestly love to work as a train operator, yes.
You wouldn't want to work in the tower?
Not particularly, no. I like the front of the train. Years and years ago, I got to ride in front of the train with the driver on the F line, and it was awesome.
I feel like a lot of creative people have that desire to have that monotonous, it's almost like Office Space, you know, or Bukowski being a postman. Like, I mean, like, it's like monotonous, I don't have to turn my brain on type of job. Is that what you think would attract you to that?
I think that's part of it. I liked waitressing because at the end of the day, I was done. It wasn't like I was working on projects that it required me to kind of carry it over from one day to the next. And I think in my mind, being a subway driver would be a similar setup where it's like, what I have to do is very clear. I either do a good job at it or I don't, but the metrics by which that is measured are obvious. It's less about like, there's less gray areas in terms of like, if you're good at driving the subway, and also you can improve practice. I also just liked sort of the romance of it. Obviously, never having actually driven a subway for a living, I'm sure the romance palls after a while, but it just, I don't know. I like it. It's interesting to me.
Have you ever ridden between cars on the subway?
Have I what? Sorry?
Have you ever ridden between cars on the subway?
I have not. I'm not physically adventurous like at all. So no.
When I was in high school, one time the train was really crowded and I was between cars and like it was packed solid, and this yuppie tried to get on between cars and he fell. And then another guy had to grab him and pull him up.
Right.
In the tracks just before the train started.
That's one of my worst subway nightmares. Like, obviously being pushed onto the tracks is worse, but like the humiliation of like fucking up the intercar transfer is not a good scene.
You know what was my worst nightmare? Is one time I was going to high school and I got off at Union Square, you know, where the moving platforms are. And as soon as I stepped on the platform, there was a cop by the side of the train and he grabbed me and pulled me aside. That was my worst nightmare.
Probably in, I want to say 1999 or 2000, I was visiting the city and I asked an MTA worker how to get somewhere. And he was like giving me directions. And then he was like, I'm actually driving the train that's pulling into the station. Do you want to get up front with me? And that's how I ended up being in the, whatever you call the driver's seat of the train car. That was super fun. And that's what gave me my little taste.
I heard until recently when they redid the trains, maybe 10 years ago, that before that they didn't have speedometers on them. And I remember seeing some interview where the train driver said, this is going to be great because now we know how fast we're going. That's insane that they did not know how fast they were driving the train.
Right. In some ways, you almost don't need to know because the signal tells you whether or not you have to stop or go, but it's pretty inefficient, you know? Like, so we can stop talking and go watch the Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 instead if you want.
Wait. We're talking about the original Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, not the POS remake, right?
Obviously. Please. What do you think of me?
I don't know, guys. I'm more of a Money Train fan. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Money Train.
No, that movie was completely bogus. The Money Train is nothing like that in real life. If you even think about touching that Money Train, they'll shoot you. But worse than the Money Train is the garbage train. When you're on a platform, think the worst nightmare is 2 a.m. You're trying to get home and a train, you see the lights coming down into the station, and then all of a sudden you get this whiff and it pulls up and it's the garbage train. And you know you got another 40 minutes before the train comes.
Let's keep this garbage train on the side. I feel like we're going to hit the garbage train a few times in this interview.
I am the garbage train.
You can drive the garbage train, Emily. Let's set our sights high here.
A girl
Did you
can
ever
dream.
think about drawing a cartoon about the garbage train?
I'm trying to think if I have.
Because, you know, I wrote a song about the garbage train.
This might be the beginning of a whole new body of work about the garbage train.
Maybe there's a really interesting character who has to drive the garbage train and never gets to drive the regular one.
The garbage train could be like McSorley's was for Joseph Mitchell. That could be your area that you mine.
Right.
And then is the Money Train what McSorley's was with all those yuppies standing outside in the 80s waiting to get in?
I believe Money Train is a work of Kurosawa.
That's a work of crap is what it was.
I'm just saying, it's like a man from another side of the world who knows nothing about the New York subway.
Yo, Mary, what did I eat when we went to see the Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3?
The original or the remake?
I wouldn't. I went to see the original in the movies at Film Forum. And it was the guy sitting next to me said, this is a great movie, not like that POS remake. And ever since that time, any remake I call a POS remake. But I remember I got a vanilla egg cream and I had a box of something I ate. Hold on, I'm going to find out.
And that man was Leonard Maltin.
I'm getting Money Train mixed up with Runaway Train, the John Voight movie,
Ah.
which is pretty decent. And Dave, you met John Voight.
I have on multiple occasions. Very, very Republican.
Yeah.
Malamars, that's what it was. A box of Malamars and a vanilla egg cream.
What an absolutely delicious combination that sounds like.
Especially when you see Taking of Pelham in the movies, because it's much funnier in the movies than I ever saw on TV. I didn't realize how funny it was till I saw it in the movie.
Right.
I feel like I get that movie mixed up with Fort Apache, The Bronx. For some reason, they're the same thematic kind of elements to the maybe same time period.
Definitely same time period.
The Taking of Pelham is earlier in the 70s than Fort Apache.
Anyway, we should probably get back on topic. Bill, I'm going to let you drive this Money Train.
Okay, so I just feel like there's a grasping here and there's an idea of a cool job. In your opinion, is a cool job real or is it a myth? Like, do you separate your waitressing from what you're doing now? In that sense,
cool as in like I guess anything that you're doing that is something that you feel really dedicated to, that gives you meaning in some way, is a cool job. I think anything that you do for a living, it's possible to get like burnout on. If it was something that like gave you a certain amount of joy to do before, like kind of once you have to do it and you don't have a choice, you know, of course that can kind of come and go. But in terms of like a cool job,
as far as I understand, you started at the Manchester Mall at Record World. Is there a reason why you didn't work at the Naturalizer instead?
I did not work at Record World. I worked at Sam Goody.
Sam Goody. Oh, that's not that cool. Record World much cooler.
Obviously, yes. No, Sam Goody was pretty lame as record stores go, but okay as far as mall employment went.
Did you get one of those pens? Those pens that said stolen from Sam Goodies?
I did not, which is really too bad. And I also, a friend of mine stole the little key that opened the plastic shuts that we kept the CDs in, the anti-theft things, and sold it to a kid for $100, which was like the smartest thing I had ever seen anybody do. And I was ashamed that I hadn't thought of it myself.
$100 for that key?
Did it inspire you to do something later?
You know, I never actually took advantage of the fact that I worked there to steal anything. And I used to shoplift from that mall all the time, but I never shoplifted from Sam Goody.
Not even the pen?
Not even the pen.
How about the naturalizer?
So you're working at Sam Goody. Had you already started doing fanzines and things like that? Had you discovered punk rock at that point? Had that become part of your life?
So actually, before I worked for Sam Goody, my very first job was at the library, Mary Cheney Library in Manchester, because where I grew up, you could start working when you were 14, either at the library or working tobacco. And I am an indoor kid, so I worked at the library. And I think around that time, when I was like 14, is when I started getting into punk rock. So the library was actually a great place for that because all the other kids who worked at the library were like the punk rock kids who liked to read and be in air conditioning.
It's funny, when I got into punk rock, you went to like a mecca like CBGB's, not the library.
Right. Yeah. Manchester was a different scene, my friend.
You have to adapt.
Yeah.
The quote I got from one of your former bosses is that you're consistently determined with tunnel vision on goals. Usually people succeed because of privilege or proximity. Emily succeeds without either. So, I mean, I think that references your stabbing at the wall, but it seems to say that you have goals. So it doesn't sound like you just had one goal here. It sounds like,
right.
I just want to get at more of it. How did this evolve? Was there stepping stones here that brought you from one place to another to get to this ultimate place that you're at now, hopefully?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so to give you a brief like timeline, I guess, and also that's like the nicest thing I think anybody's ever said about me. I think it's a lot nicer than I deserve, but I'll take it. So library, Sam Goody. I went to college. I went to art school in Baltimore, delivered pizzas. The fuck else did I do? I worked at coffee shops, et cetera, et cetera. And then when I graduated college, waitress, and then started working at Carrot Top in Chicago. I think sometime during my tenure in Chicago, like from the time I was in college, I was trying to get freelance work. At some point, I realized when I was living in Chicago that like I wasn't good enough to work from anywhere. Like nobody was going to find my little light under a tree in Chicago. And I was like, I basically am going to have to move to New York where things actually happen so that I can sort of be in this world where this shit I want to do happens and see if I can do it, see if I can make it work. So basically I moved from Chicago to New York in January of 2004. And I knew maybe one or two people here. One of the most important things that happened to me when I moved to New York is a friend of a friend brought me to the Onion's Whiskey Friday. So the Onion used to do this whiskey, but it's exactly what it sounds like, whiskey on Fridays. Basically, people would come and congregate and drink whiskey at the Onion offices until everybody was drunk. That was sort of like my first in terms of like at least adjacent to what I wanted to do. But again, that was a measure of proximity actually that brought me to a point where I could start to get a handhold in what I wanted to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just interested because the first time I met you, you were probably like 15. I feel like you couldn't get your level of conversation audible. Like I couldn't even hear you speak.
Yeah.
So like when did that Emily become the Emily?
It sounds like a lot of the things we have on this podcast.
When did that Emily turn into an Emily that's able to navigate and conquer Whiskey Friday?
That is an excellent question. I think I managed to construct a reasonable facade of a person behind which non-speaking Emily could hide. Probably sometime in college, I'm going to say. I don't have a great bead on how I was perceived like when I was in high school. Like I knew, I know who my friends were and I know what I liked. I don't know if I was thought of as funny or if I was thought of as shy or what. But I would say that moving somewhere where nobody knew me was, like anything else, a chance to be like, maybe I could try to be a different kind of person than I am.
Did you try to have an English accent or something like that?
Yeah, I immediately adopted an English accent. It was awesome. It turns out I'm not from Manchester, Connecticut. I'm from Manchester, UK.
But now you jump up on stage and stuff. So, I mean, there's even more to it than Whiskey Friday.
Right. Also, not a thing I think I would have ever thought possible when I was 16. I don't know. I think we are bearing the lead here, which is whiskey. Whiskey helped.
Okay, that's understandable.
Once I discovered my best friend liquor, everything got a lot easier.
There's something that you said in the Young and Dumb strip about punk rock, and you said joining a club whose membership rules were never articulated. When you look at where you are now, with there's such a distinct identity for like the New Yorker crowd or the NPR crowd, whatever that may be, do you feel like there's similarities in that in the same way? And did you have trouble adjusting to that, or do you feel like punk rock kind of helped you with that?
I think in a lot of ways, punk rock kind of helped me with that, because the kids that I was and am friends with were really smart kids who, to use a phrase, expanded my horizons to a place that I'm not sure would have ever happened had I not gotten into punk rock. And I think there's overlap between people who are into punk rock and people who read the New Yorker. You know, I think there's a range of stereotypical New Yorker readers. And actually, I've been sort of writing an essay about this whole idea in my head for a while now, that I have existed on the periphery of a bunch of different identities. So in some ways that's helpful, and in some ways it feeds into my never-ending imposter syndrome. So make of that what you will.
As far as kind of your subject matter recently, and especially, you know, in regards to the pandemic, in regards to Black Lives Matter, I mean, there seems to be a lot of current affairs, you know, element to your work. Do you ever feel like there's certain things that you're sharing that you may be afraid you're not tapping into this cultural zeitgeist thing, that it's just something weird that you believe? Is there ever a fear when you're creating something that this is something that just exists for you and other people aren't going to relate to it?
Sure, absolutely. If I'm in a situation where I'm making work where I feel like, oh, what if this is just what I think? I just try to make it as honest about what I think as possible. I feel like it's a lot less successful if I actively try to tap into a zeitgeist at the expense of how I actually feel about a thing.
To that end as well, when you're putting so much of yourself into your work, how do you deal with the fact, you again touched upon this in Young and Dumb, where you said, you know, people putting all of their thoughts and feelings on Jawbreaker. Has that happened to you yet, where someone's come up and wanted to talk to you intensely about something that you created that was personal to you, and you kind of felt like, oh, well, I gave you what I felt comfortable with, and you're crossing a boundary? Has that happened to you at all with your work?
I've never felt like people cross a boundary with it. I mean, it honestly makes me so grateful if people feel like something that I wrote or drew resonated with them or made them feel less alone. Like, that's all I want out of what I do. So I never feel like, wait a second, no, you don't get to know my private thoughts. I am super slutty with my private thoughts, so it's fine. I don't have boundaries.
Have you ever run into that girl with super long hair and very thick glasses that couldn't audibly speak to you and tried?
So a few months back, a girl came up to me at a show that I did. She was in her 20s because it was in a bar, but she was very, hi, I know your work, but yeah, she was so sweet about it. And I was like, I wanted to mother duck the shit out of her. You know, I was just like, oh, you sweet thing. You know, that's a beautiful thing when it happens. And I also want to be like, honey, it's okay. Start drinking. It'll get better.
She might be your competition soon.
Yeah, you know, everything's got a shelf life.
Drinking?
Especially ladies.
I just want to ask a little bit more about when you're, you know, working freelance and you're submitting all this stuff. What's the percentage of like work you have to do compared to what actually gets picked up? And does that energize you or deflate you?
I would say the ratio of stuff that I pitch to the stuff that gets bought is, 10-1 at best. There's a lot of stuff that I pitch that nothing ever happens with. And I'm pretty philosophical about that. I'm pretty much like immune to rejection at this point. That's just part of the job.
Do you have go down like a list of like, you know, you get rejected by somebody, you go down to the next one, and is there anything that you process with?
There are so few outlets, especially for like gag cartoons. There are a few other places, but it's not like 40 years ago when there were like 10, 12 magazines that reliably bought gag cartoons. So yeah, if the New Yorker doesn't buy it, like there's a precipitous drop between the New Yorker and like the next place I try.
But I mean, obviously there must be times And these 9 that don't get picked up, and you can look at them and say, well, they were absolutely wrong about this because it's great, right? And so what do you do with that?
I resubmit some if I feel strongly about it. I've resubmitted stuff and I've sold stuff that I resubmitted. So that's always a possibility. If it's something that like I know they're absolutely not going to buy and maybe no one will buy it, sometimes I just put it on Instagram for fun.
So people still get to see it.
Yeah.
Is there something that you've created that just you keep trying to push that no one else thinks is a good idea, but you're stuck on it? Kind of like your Jerry Lewis, the day the clown cried moment. Is there something that you just like, I have to get this through at some point?
Oh, I know I had a couple that I was like, God damn it, you're going to take this. But there are some that I feel like they're the ones that I really like more are the ones where I know they're never going to, like, because they're just too absurd or they're too crude. I'm trying to think, and nothing is like, now I'm just completely drawing a blank as to which ones those might be. But there's actually one that I put in the batch this week that's a resubmit that's like a dumb, smart joke that hinges on the difference between a Sisyphean task and a Pyrrhic victory. It's such a dumb, pretentious joke, but I kind of love it. I won't say I've necessarily submitted like a lot of dick jokes to the New Yorker, but I haven't submitted no dick jokes to the New Yorker. So
I'm going to stop the conversation for 1 second and tell you, if you enjoyed this conversation, there's tons more where this came from. For only $5 a month, you can get full episodes with each of our guests for a total of 5 episodes per month. Want to help out with some gas money to get us to the next show? We have merch and more at killedbydesk.com. Now let's get back to the show.
Did you ever explore like the Jersey Shore boardwalk t-shirt market?
I need to learn how to use an airbrush.
Oh no, I was just thinking about like the offensive dick joke t-shirts that a Guido would buy.
I think I need to up my pun game before I can really crack into that market.
Just take a step back for a second. Gad cartoons, I don't know if everyone would understand what that means.
Okay, so like a gag, like a single panel gag cartoon is basically like the cartoons that you see in the New Yorker, like something that is just a standalone panel, one joke thing. So as opposed to like a comic strip.
Like Marmaduke?
Exactly not like Marmaduke.
Like Family Circus.
What happened to Family Circus? Is that still around?
God, probably. It's a good question. Marmaduke and Family Circus, like anything that is like a single panel, I think because there's like a rotating cast of characters that stays consistent is something that I think of more as like a comic strip, even if it's not in strip form. But when I'm thinking of just like the basic, here is a delivery system for a joke that isn't part of a larger world, that's what I mean when I say like gag cartooning.
Okay, I want to dig into a little bit about you pitching your original strip while working at the newspaper, like how you got the strength to like ask that what the negotiation looked like and how it might have changed over time.
So I interned at the city paper when I was in college. This is the Baltimore City paper. It was the local alt weekly. I think my first paying illustration job came from them, like the job that actually paid me money. My first illustration gig in general was, oh my God, I'm blanking on the name, but it was like an art magazine that paid in postcards. But the first time I got like money for an illustration was from the city paper. So they ran cartoons, but they were all on like one page, not interspersed throughout the newspaper. So I wrote up a bunch of cartoons, and this was after I interned for them. This is when I was living in Chicago, and was like, here are my cartoon ideas. Can I please be a cartoon? And they were basically like, we don't have room on the page, but if something comes up, I'll let you know. And then somebody dropped out and they were like, do you want the slot? You have 4.5 inches by 3.5 inches. It's yours if you want it. So that is exactly what dictated the shape of Lulu 8-Ball, is that was the space they had in the newspaper. But because I knew them and had a history with them, that was a big part of me, like being able to pitch something.
I heard there was something that was kind of like a big deal is you, for Pride Week, you created like a design your own boyfriend, girlfriend, like paper doll type of thing. I was told it's the epitome of like Flake cute meets Flake edgy.
Oh man, I forgot all about that actually. I did do that. I wish I could remember the jokes. I have absolutely no idea what I wrote for that. But I do have a vague memory of having done exactly that. That sounds very on brand for me.
The original comic that we traded when we were teenagers or whatever, I think it was a bunch of sheep.
Oh yeah, that I remember.
Is there a reason it was a bunch of sheep? Did you like have a sheep obsession? Or they're just easy to draw?
Dude, I thought sheep were funny. They were easy to draw. I basically drew a bunch of sheep cartoons cartoons about this guy who had sex with his sheep because I thought that was hilarious, and it made my best friend at the time crack up. So that was pretty much my entire audience of one.
What the other thing that I heard is you were assigned a piece on Linda Barry, and it seems like your attitude or something changed in that piece. Can you talk a little bit about that? Was it as special as it seemed to everyone else to you? Does Linda Barry mean something more to you, like Jawbreaker or something like that?
Linda Barry does mean a lot to me. I've been a fan for a really, really long time. And I mean, she definitely seemed like somebody to emulate in terms of what she did and who she was. I'm trying to remember that piece. It's possible that they assigned me to write that and that I had been a casual fan who became a much deeper fan at that point.
Well, you actually like talked to her and stuff at that point then too, right? You knew her a little bit more as a person.
Yeah, I interviewed her over email. Man, these are deep cuts, man. We're talking like 20 years ago. I'm very old. I don't know if you have successfully conveyed that to your audience, but I am 648 years old.
I was just told that was where you switched from like trying too hard to be funny to just getting a little bit more deeply human and genuine. It actually became much funnier.
Interesting. That's a really interesting way to think about it. I think that was one of the first things that I wrote for the city paper. I would write articles for them, every now and again. So that interview must have been one of the first things. And every once in a while, I'll look at it like an email I wrote in 2001 or whatever, and just cringing at the tryhardiness of it. Maybe this was the beginning of the, simmer down period. Interesting.
Hold on a second. You can right now go and find an email from 2001.
I throw out nothing.
Okay. I was going to get to this because there was a point where you asked for my help. I believe you were very attached to a car.
Yes.
And it needed to be put down.
Yes.
So as far as I remember it, the car was in my parents' driveway for a few weeks because you also needed to part with some of the stuff in it.
Yes.
And I also understand you carry a very big wallet and you save a lot of crap in there, like a Seinfeld type of way. Is that something you're dealing with?
Have I gotten help with my hoarding problem? Is that what you're...
I'm saying is it a problem or is it part of your process? Are you holding on to them because is it superstition or is it I need this stuff because I might run out of material and I need to dig through it?
Oh, it's fucking all of it, honestly. I lost a lot of emails because I had an old website that I had an email attached to, and then I switched URLs and lost. Either way, I lost a lot of emails, and that was very sad for me, but it's my life didn't get materially worse because of it. I'm bad at throwing things away, in part because I'm what if I need it? And in part because I'm very lazy and disorganized. But yeah, no, you did help me get rid of that car very much, and I think about that fairly often, actually.
It was pretty sketchy, even for me. We were in a dead-end street, and we literally the guy handed you a stack of bills.
He handed me $80. I sold that car to a junk man for $80, and I was getting a bunch of shit out of it, and I was sad because I had loved that car, and the junk guy came up to me and he's like, "Miss, this car is a piece of shit. Give her a little kiss for her service and let her go."
Wait, so are you the person in American Pickers that won't sell them anything because it's all worth too much?
No, I would sell stuff for money. I don't not like money. Yeah, I mean, I did sell that car for $80 whole. So obviously I've got a price.
There was no title involved. That thing was crushed immediately.
You know how I look at it? It's it's your stuff, so you want to just keep it. That's how I look at it. Have you ever heard of the Collier Brothers? Because they're kind of heroes of mine.
Oh, Jesus. That's one way to die.
Yeah, I had this really good idea for years, and I've always wanted to, is Collier Brothers Cafe. When they had all these themed restaurants in Manhattan.
You're going to have to explain this, Charlie.
The Collier Brothers were two brothers who lived up in Harlem back when, in the early, maybe 1920s or something like that.
Yeah.
And they had lived in a big mansion. They were, I guess they were inherited money, and they just hoarded stuff. And they hoarded so much stuff, it packed the whole house. And one of the brothers was to say blind or something like that, and the other brother used to care for him. And as he was walking through the tunnels of their stuff, it collapsed on him and he was trapped and they both died.
So in the cafe experience,
Yes.
you would be risking your life?
No, only with the food possibly, but there would be stuff like everywhere, you know what I mean, piled up, and you'd go in and you'd sit like a table, your booth would be in there with stuff all around you, and you'd walk through tunnels to get to your booth. And
So like a cat cafe, but for hoarders.
what was that? What kind of cafe?
Like a cat cafe, you know, the one where they have the
Yeah, cats, except with no allergies, because nobody be allergic.
Hypoallergenic hoarder cafe.
It's like the Hard Rock Cafe or the Planet Hollywood and these type of places. Or
Could you bring the stuff home? Could you like take whatever's at your table, or no, that's stuck, that stays there?
No, that stays there.
It's like Cracker Barrel. They're like nailed to the wall.
It could be auctioned. It could be auctioned for charity.
Is the cup you drink out of, do you just pull it out of the hoard?
Listen, we're open to ideas here.
It's like a really shitty automat where everything comes from the pile.
Listen, the automat closed. The automat closed at just the time where it would have been popular again.
I agree.
That's absolutely true.
Wait, so we didn't get to the bottom of this. Emily, are you a hoarder?
I would not characterize myself as a hoarder. I would characterize myself as a slob with attachments.
Have you ever lived alone where you were able to like not be embarrassed about it and like lock it up?
When I first moved here, I lived in a house with like 3 younger dudes and everybody was disgusting. So like I was less ashamed of myself. But then when I met the man who eventually became my husband, he was taken aback at the level of grossness I achieved. So it's kind of been that situation ever since. I've never lived like by myself in an apartment.
As a mother, do you now hoard everything that your daughter creates? Like, do you have every piece of art she's ever made? Are you one of those moms?
Not every piece. I save a fair amount of stuff, but she produces a lot of content. I can't keep it all.
Have you ever submitted any of it?
She's still working on that particular like dry, pithy wit. She'll get there.
Does she like your music? Like, is she into the same stuff? Have you gotten her into the stuff that you grew up listening to?
Not particularly. I haven't really tried that much. I have a lot of ideas about whether or not children should be into punk rock. Frankly, I don't think they've earned it.
Are you being elitist with your own child?
100% am, yes. So, yeah, she likes a couple of the radio hits right now. She likes Madonna. I'm fine with that. Children don't have to have good taste. I honestly think it's better if they don't.
My sister's wrestling with that right now. One of her sons has gotten into skateboarding and he's now really into Screeching Weasel, which she's having a problem with because she's definitely political. She lives in a Yome in Asheville, North Carolina, but she's one of those people. She has a Screeching Weasel tattoo, but I actually found one of my old Screeching Weasel shirts and sent it to him. And she was like, I'm really conflicted about whether I let him wear this or not. I was like, okay.
Yeah, no, seriously. I could never, for instance, even, Tug becomes a teenager and starts getting into punk rock. I'm like, I can't tell you about the Descendants. Mm-hmm. Like, that's a terrible thing to put in a young woman's head.
Yeah, my daughter's heavily into new wave.
Like Information Society New Wave?
Yeah, she's 19. No, not Information. She's 19. And then last night at like 3 a.m., I asked her, hey, can you give me a Morrissey song that insults de Blasio? And she refused to. I needed it. I was in an email fight with somebody and I needed it. And just like right now, I asked them what I ate at the Taking a Pelham 1-2-3 showing when she was 11 years old, that she stares at me with a blank stare, You
have the most specific questions about everything. That's wonderful. Wait, what is a Yome?
It's a domed tent. It has a wood base and it's canvas, but it's all weather. And there's a hole in the middle so you can have a wood burning stove in there. But she lives completely off the grid. It's funny. She's my twin sister and we both grew up in the punk scene, but she took a definite different turn. I mean, I'm an EVP at a communications and marketing company and she's an RN. But she does, her work is specifically with women, imprisoned women. So she goes in and she teaches them, because a lot of them are younger. She teaches them how to care for themselves, how to deal with their periods and things like that as well.
That's amazing. So she's like really living her principles.
Oh, she's incredible. Yeah. There's times when we're all together as a family and I catch her like thumbing through a J. Crew catalog and I wonder if she has regrets.
I too want to wear some linen board shorts.
Dave loves to separate himself from his twin sister. I'll just tell you from experience, they are exactly the same.
That's not true.
They are 100% the same. What's the difference between a yurt and a yodel or whatever it is?
A yurt and a yome. So a yome is a dome. A yurt is very similar, but it is more set up like a traditional tent.
Well, I thought we were talking about Drake's Cakes all of a sudden, man. Now I'm disappointed. I've eaten a whole box of devil dogs.
That's a great idea, Charlie. We could make like a natural hippie version of Drake's Cakes and name them after these.
That's sacrilege.
I feel like Drake's Cakes are like the GoBots to Hostess's Transformers. I feel like Drake's Cakes are like the off-brand kind of lesser of the two. I feel like Charlie's going to be really mad at me for saying that.
Yo, those are fighting words.
Listen, I'm a strictly tasty cake person myself, so.
Oh, tasty cake. Okay, now we're talking. That's good.
Charlie once ate 2 boxes of tasty cake.
Yes. No, those weren't tasty cake. No, those were not
fry
tasty.
hoppers. They were fry
Fry
hoppers.
The band almost broke up because of that.
Speaking of the differences between my sister and myself, I actually, when we were preparing for this interview, I was looking through, and I think it was on your Instagram possibly, was the cartoon of the couple looking at the house and saying, is this the house we want to be in for the apocalypse? I laughed so hard at it because like my wife and I literally had the same conversation about our house, and we were trying to figure out like, are we prepared? Is this the right place to be? I realized that you're really kind of mining this specific vein of like middle-class, middle-aged suburban angst.
Right.
And is that a purposeful thing? I mean, is that a reflection of just your life the way it is? Or is that something that you're like, this is a gold pot and I'm just going to go for it?
A little from column A, a little from column B. I mean, I am definitely middle-aged and middle class. You know, I live in Brooklyn, but who cares? And basically anxiety is a bottomless well of humor. So I'm going to just mine whatever I'm feeling particularly anxious about. But yeah, I don't know. I made a lot of apocalypse jokes before the apocalypse started to happen. So who's laughing now?
That's where you can start resubmitting.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to go back to this fearfulness thing, and I don't take chances and things like that. I feel like you've made comments like that. From what I understand, you were offered a free trip to Jamaica. Mm-hmm. I also understand that you went on the free trip the year before and it didn't go well. We can talk about that in a minute. You gave up, your work was closed, and you said, I'm going to go to New York to try to pitch myself for a week. Mm-hmm. And then you just, like you said, you moved to New York.
So this free trip was to Jamaica, Queens?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm confused.
There was some good tamales there.
Yeah.
And then you just moved to New York almost knowing nobody there. You moved in with people. I remember you telling me what the people were doing you moved in with, and I was horrified and scared for you. And then you told me who they were, and I knew who they were, and I was even more scared. I don't believe you that you don't have this dangerous streak or self-destructive streak, or your chopping at the wall might be actually chopping at the floor.
Is it bravery or is it stupidity, Bill?
I don't know. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Right. That's the question for the ages. So to back up the Jamaica situation, so my boss at Carrot Top every year would bring the whole company, I mean, we're talking like 6-7 people, on what he insisted was not a vacation, but a corporate retreat to Jamaica, where our job was basically to get drunk twice a day. And I went the first year when I first started working there. It was amazing. I had a fantastic time. I got a terrible sunburn. That might be what he's talking about. But the next year they were going again, but I was like, it didn't feel right for me to take a vacation when I had my goals to work on. So I guess that does sound like an ambitious person's speech.
Let's go to stupidity for a second, because from what I understand is you not only got a sunburn, but there was a clear one handprint of sunscreen where you just like gave up putting it on.
I had only been working at Carrot Top for maybe just a few weeks, and I didn't really know anybody well enough to ask them to put sunscreen on me, so I just sort of tried to figure it out myself. And yeah, I absolutely had like a white handprint in a sea of angry red flesh.
I also heard you almost died.
Oh yeah, I totally did. I was swimming and I went out a little too far. The current was stronger than I realized. So yeah, some kid named Ratty, who had worked at like this at the resort thing that we were at, came like racing down the beach and basically like hauled me back to shore. This is why I don't do things like step between subway cars, because I am not physically adept.
Yeah, well one time I was at the 74th Street station, and my friend, we were going to Coney Island. I was on the 7 train, and my friend's behind me. He's like, get off. And the train hadn't stopped yet, and I stepped off, and I went flying down the platform like you wouldn't believe.
You have a lot of subway stories, Charlie.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Danger behind every corner. God, I forgot all about that.
I think if the goal is there, you will step in between the subway cars.
I'm in. Yeah, if I had to step in between the subway cars for my work, yes, I probably would.
Would you step between the subway cars to save a yuppie's life?
No. I was about to say depends on the yuppie, but probably not.
Do you want your New Yorker readership to know that?
Yeah, what if you're saving the yuppie and they're like, I love your work?
Ah, that, yeah. Oof, the logic trap I just fell into is very painful.
So what about performing on stage? For someone who does a lot of work visually and then you also perform, do you have a preference as to which one you love more? Does it switch back and forth? How do you deal with both of those?
I think one really feeds the other. I don't have any illusions that like I'm not going to make it in stand up or anything like that, but I will really truly enjoy being on a stage and telling jokes, and the energy that like comes from that is very important to everything else that I do. So I think everything that I do kind of feeds every other thing that I do.
What's next then? What's missing? Is there anything missing?
I mean, it's basically just do more and do better, I guess. I have pitched some TV stuff, and that would be great because I do, in fact, love money. So that would be pretty awesome. I basically just feel like for the rest of my life, we'll try to keep getting better at what I do, because at some point I'm going to age out of being able to go to train school.
Is there a limit to that? Is it like the military?
Probably. Yeah. I'd probably pass it a long time
From
ago.
what I understand, it is very difficult, actually. Getting back to Linda Barry, my wife went to a Linda Barry workshop.
I thought we were getting back to the garbage train.
We will get back to the garbage train.
Okay, because I have another question about that.
As far as I understand, Linda Barry was offered a television show that, like, I think Jim Belushi was going to produce or something, and she turned it down. So is there something that you'd feel that you could do something like that, where I think she was probably like grew up with Matt Groening, and I think she realized she didn't want to become him, whatever that means. Is there some sort of like limit to what you would want to do and like how you'd want to be presented or portrayed or your art to be used? What does selling out mean to you, if it means anything?
There was something that was just really like terribly unfunny or didn't feel like, if I felt like I would be lying to myself if I worked on it, I think that is where my limit would be. Or if it was something that was like actively harmful. But neither of those situations have really come up. I worked for a while writing celebrity dirt jokes for Jenny McCarthy's radio program. So basically I had to provide like 10 little like almost monologue jokes about celebrity culture for every show. And honestly, I fucking loved that. It was super fun. I don't think I have like necessarily like very strict taste parameters, but yeah, I'm sure if a situation came up where I was like, this is just absolute bullshit and it's embarrassing, I don't know. But on the other hand, I'm a freelancer and I have a very hard time saying no to like anything ever. So I don't want to paint myself into a corner. This isn't like a legally binding podcast, right?
This is your job interview for the Drudge Report. We already talked about that.
Great. Fantastic.
Yeah, also, you didn't sound too warm on my Guido Boardwalk t-shirt idea.
I mean, that's only because I'm not sure I have the chops. Like, I don't want to try and fail.
It sounds like money would be nice to have, but like, is that your Stalinistic 5-year plan here?
I don't really have a Stalinistic 5-year plan as concerns money. I do like to have it. I certainly don't like eschew money or the trappings of money. I'm very bad with money. I am super bad at like saving and budgeting and doing all the things that grown-ups do. But I don't have like I have goals and things that I would like to do, but I certainly don't have like a 5-year plan in place.
Do you think you'll stay in New York? I mean, I know it seems like it's such a part of who you are from your work. Do you ever see yourself leaving?
I would prefer not to. I mean, I love it here. I love where we live. I mean, you know, we rent, so it's not like our situation is rock solid here. I don't want to move. I mean, my husband spent a long time in Montreal, and there, you know, every once in a while it's like, you know, like I could totally live in Montreal, but it's not like a life goal to get out of here. Like every other person who lives in New York, I sometimes look at like Zillow for places where we could actually like afford to buy a house, but that's more like, you know, fantasy times than wanting to leave.
Let's say the money thing did happen and all of a sudden you were like in charge of an organization.
Right.
Does that scare you? Like, having employees? And
Yes, I don't want to be in charge.
are you terrified of not doing freelance gig work? Or are you terrified of people having to like ask you what they're doing next?
I am scared of being in any kind of position where I have to be the organizing boss of something. I like to write, and I would like to, like, let's say a TV thing happens. I would want to write on it and possibly get better and better at that. But like, I have no aspirations like to be a showrunner. That sounds terrifying. I know how much responsibility I should be given, and it's not very much.
Yeah, it's much easier just to sit around and make wisecracks, I find.
Exactly. That is basically what I want to do. If somebody could pay me to just and like run my mouth in a bar, I would do that in a heart.
Well, Charlie, do you get paid for that?
I hope so.
Does that come with dental?
I haven't seen a check yet.
Well, you're not corrupt
I'm sure
enough.
they're just saving them for you.
Well, I have a question about the garbage train. Now, give it to me. If you had something that you wanted to save and somebody was getting rid of it and they got rid of it, and then you were sitting in the substation and the garbage train pulled in and you saw it was on the garbage train, would you get on between cars to get it?
That is a good question. If it was something that was really important to me,
Now, you've seen this like everyone, sometimes you go to throw out the garbage and you find there's something there that's yours and it's in
Right.
the garbage and somebody threw it out and you sneak it back in the house, This is what I'm
Right.
talking about, except instead of the garbage can, it's the garbage train.
it's the garbage train.
And you got to get on between.
There's a lot of logistics happening in this scenario. I guess it would depend on whether or not it was wet. If it was wet, I'd probably have to let it go.
Okay. Stipulated.
But yeah, I don't know.
I mean, no garbage train. You only see the garbage train at like 2 a.m. So there's no issue with like, well, if I was on my way to work, because that ain't happening.
Right. And also, it would have to be something fairly large, or how would I like see it in the garbage train? Would it be furniture?
It doesn't have to be furniture. It could be some kind of memorabilia.
It could be all the emails you left at the website.
Yes, I would. If it was letters, if it was memorabilia, yes, I probably would. I'm very driven by emotion.
So this may be something you don't feel comfortable talking about, but it seems like you are somewhat public about it, both in comics you've done in the past and on your Instagram. Religion, as a religious person, is that something that started as an adult? Did you grow up with that? And how does that fit within who you are and how you represent yourself?
So that definitely started as an adult. I started going to this Episcopalian church in my neighborhood, and Episcopalians are basically, it's all the Catholicism with less of the bullshit, I guess. I don't know. That's not a great thing to say. But so where I grew up, most people were Catholic. We didn't go to church. We went to Unitarian church a couple times, but my family is like historically Episcopalian. So it felt like there was sort of like a through line of my own personal family history. But also I knew I wanted to start a family. I wanted to bring my kid up with both a faith that she could use as sort of like a jumping off point, just something so that she knew she wasn't the center of the universe. And I wanted something that would sort of like root her in the community as well. I felt like that was important. So I would describe myself as like a practicing Episcopalian agnostic, basically, but I enjoy the like ritual of the church. I enjoy the history of it. I certainly can't say with 100% certainly like anything as regards to God, but like I do like going to church.
So you're just using it for the perks.
I am basically just using it because those wafers are delicious.
It's the cheapest country club you can join.
You didn't have that growing up, though, right? You felt like there's something missing.
I didn't feel tied to the community I grew up in any way, shape, or form. I didn't like that feeling. That feeling of dislocation definitely informed a lot of who I was growing up. And I think I've always been searching for a way to have some kind of connection to a community or something larger than myself. So I think that had a lot to do with it for sure.
Can you still be punk and go to church?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. I know some
God rules. God rules. Haven't you ever heard it? Undercover?
I don't know. Wait, I don't know what you're talking about, Charlie.
You don't know that song? You know that one? You're sitting there, you think you're pretty cool, but wait a minute, there's Jesus. God rules, God rules.
No, but I need to hear this.
Bill, you consider yourself a scenester. Get out of here.
This is an Albany style song.
Albany style. Albany style's got nothing on Undercover. This is like Christian punk.
I only know Knights of the New Crusade.
And that's all a joke.
God rules.
I gotta find this song now. I have.
You know what it is? When you have a family, the whole religion thing, like I was one time had my daughter at Uber Duber, and there were these Hasidic Jews there. And when I was younger, I'm like, why would anybody want to be a Hasidic Jew? You think the kids would leave. But then you see these Hasidic Jews there, and they're there with their families, all these kids, and these two guys are there talking. I was like, these guys probably knew each other since they were kids, were friends, and here they are, they're at Uber Duber with their families, talking, having a great time. And then I could say, at that point, when you have a family, you can say, you can understand why you'd want to be a Hasidic Jew and have a community like that.
But that's a good thing and a bad thing. Isn't that why they can't leave even if they want to, because they don't know anything else? It's kind of like being Amish.
Yeah, that's how I always thought of it myself until I started, seeing this. When you have a family, you kind of think of it differently.
Well, like with anything where there's constrictions, there's upsides and downsides. You are in a cloistered world, but I'm sure it's very cozy in there. But yeah, no, I think that sense of, for lack of a better word, that sense of community is important. I think it's a good thing to raise a kid in.
I remember when I was in high school, I heard about a Hasidic Jewish ska band.
That sounds good.
That does sound good.
Ska's making a comeback. Yes, it is.
What wave will this be? 6th, 7th?
I think this is 6th wave, right? Yeah.
What are we on now?
5th or 6th? Do you think Tim Johannen's spinning in his grave because you put Maximum Rock and Roll in the New Yorker?
Yeah, I expect a real dressing down as I die. I'm surprised his ghost hasn't come to me yet, to be honest.
There's cartoonists, right, that their strips keep running years after they die.
Mm-hmm.
Like Gasoline Alley.
Is like that too much of a legacy?
Zombie strips. Yeah, I don't love that. I don't know how good a zombie strip really stays. I was never like such a huge fan of any of the newspaper strips that I thought that like if Peanuts had gone on after Charles Schultz died, I think that would have been a shame. You know what I mean? Because it was so deeply tied to who he was as a person. I think if your work can be done by somebody else, it is missing an essential emotional core.
Like when Jim Henson died and other people started doing the voices?
Yeah, see, bullshit. Non-canonical.
That's officially the nerdiest thing you've said on this podcast.
Pretty high bar, too. Nerdier than Sisyphus.
You did reference Pyrrhic victories and Sisyphus.
So, if you want an artifact of the dead world, you can find my book that was offered, The Art and Etiquette of the Awkward Hug. I also wrote a book called Mama Tried, that's cartoons and essays about parenthood and mothering that I still feel pretty good about. I do a show called Nightmares that is basically I and my co-host interview people about their bad dreams. We did it as a live show. We have since done a couple episodes as a podcast, and it's available as a podcast even from the live show. So hopefully we'll be able to like get in a real room and do those on stage again, because Zoom, it's fine, but I really do miss being in an actual room. Oh, and I also do a show called Shit Show with Ophira Eisenberg. When we did it as a live show, it was a stand-up comedy showcase, but we've been doing it more as like interviews since the Troubles began.
That's it, kids. The gig is up. The cops are here, and your mom is calling jails, hospitals, and all your friends' houses wondering where you've been. Tune in next week for another fascinating, mesmerizing, and absolutely unmissable episode. And be sure to get on the list and follow the boys on social media at Killed by Desk. This podcast is produced by Jesse Cannon, and if you enjoyed this conversation, there's tons more where this came from. For only $5 a month, you can get full episodes with each of our guests for a total of 5 episodes per month. Want to help us out with some gas money and to get us to the next show? We have merch and more at KilledByDesk.com.